Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app, Podbean. No, we're not on Podbean. Red Circle, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. That's the first time I've screwed that up. Also, the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Make sure you hit like, subscribe, and turn the notifications on. Also, subscribe to Off the Floor, $3.05 per month. Text directly to your phone. Bypass X, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Spreads, Threads, whatever it's called. Get text directly from Alex, myself, Brady, and Greg. Insights about the team, special Q&As, prize picks, contests, and more. Again, it's $3.05 per month. Winnow.app/off the floor. Also, check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network. That includes Prize Picks. Use the code 5FIVE. Get that initial deposit matched up to $100. FIBA basketball going on right now. They've got all of it up on Prize Picks. Make sure you get in the night before because that's when the best props get on there. Use the code 5FIVE. Get that initial deposit matched up to $100. And, of course, you can play the NFL futures, NFL regular season games, MLS, Messi, MMA. It's all on there. Go to Prize Picks. Use the code FIVE. And now, today's episode.
Down the bitch gang. Five on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars. Wearing bubble frauds. Just like Butler said, you in trouble, y'all. Kept the floor playing. Got it all banned. Y'all seen the block. Stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, Inspire have the guts. We're here to bring the heat. Y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, and Alex Toledo, plus others from the Five Reasons Sports Network.
All right, welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I got Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. And if you listened to a previous podcast that I was on, you're familiar with this guy, but you should be familiar with him from SB Nation, Forbes Sports, Fansided. I do not know why he's doing this if he's a JD candidate, but you can follow him at Matt Issa 15. Again, that's Matt Issa 15. That's 1T. And we brought him on because everybody has been asking us about Christian Wood. And Greg had a report about 2 weeks ago that if the Heat get Dame, that Wood was likely coming. And one of the reasons for that is because Jovic would likely go out. Now, we'll see what ends up happening there and if Joe Cronin decides to budge and if Dame's interview with Mark Spears made any difference. And we discussed that on a previous episode. But either way, Christian Wood does not appear to be the kind of player who should still be out there at this late date without a team. This is a player who was pretty highly coveted when he was in Detroit. He's bounced around in a couple spots since then, seemed to lose favor in Dallas. I would follow all these writers, Matt, in Dallas, who would be saying, why isn't Christian Wood playing more? But it seemed like Jason Kidd just didn't like him. And so we want to get into the reasons why. And I also want to get into, obviously, your article where you think that at this point, he's kind of become an overhated player. Is that a fair way to put this?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's there's like a similar line of player kind of that they just like fall into this vacuum where they might be a little bit rough around the edges. They might have just been in a bad situation, who knows? And yeah, people just kind of take that and they're like turn into a bunch of things that it's really not and kind of, lose the forest for the trees. Is that the metaphor, right? Or
I think so, yes. Forest for the trees.
Honestly, it's amazing because that's like a running bit when it comes to me because I'm constantly screwing up like commonly used phrases. Yes. So it's perfect.
It's the forest from the lakes, according to Alex. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly.
But why is that? Why do you think that that's happened?
Why do I think that's happened? Okay, so I think this is just like in general, like I think fans, depending on how they feel about a player, they over-index on their strengths or they over-index on their weaknesses, not understanding that every player, just like you, it's just like, your friends, your family, we have our strengths, we have our weaknesses, there's certain thing like that you really like about one friend or you really hate about one friend. And I think people over-index a lot on Christian Wood's weaknesses, which would be, he's not like incredibly laterally gifted, mobile big man in today's era. He, apparently is a little rough around the edges in the locker room. He's not like he plays. Okay, so I think the biggest weakness would be that he plays a position where defense is the most important, and that's not his strong suit. So people take that and are like, okay, he's not worth anything. Like he's still a free agent. And I know part of it's like Sam Quinn of CBS, he read my article, he quote tweeted and he said something along the lines of it's more like a situational kind of thing. I think he's waiting to see how the damn thing plays out. And that wasn't my reason for writing the article, was saying that all 30 teams were being silly, not signing him. I understand that there's more to it than that. But I think it was more of a response to kind of the reaction I was seeing from just like people who watch the game and how low they'd become on Christian Wood, where it's like, yeah, he's a flawed player, but that doesn't mean like his strengths can't be used in a way, where you have him on your team and you're making a deep playoff run. You know what I mean? The Miami Heat just made a deep playoff run. Every guy on the roster had some flaws, so that's kind of what I'm seeing.
I mean, it's a great point that you're making there, especially when you talked about, people kind of overemphasizing weaknesses when they don't like a guy, or overemphasizing strengths when they want, their team to sign a guy, for example. And I think Christian Wood is an awesome, kind of barometer for that line of thinking, just because I think people who really like him see the production when you just look at a stat line, right? You look at a guy who will give you that type of production night in and night out, and he can really shoot the ball. And then the people who don't like him are always going to talk about how, when you like how you mentioned the lack of mobile agility. I just think he kind of gets the reputation of, bad attitude, maybe locker room cancer. Those types of like labels get thrown onto people. And I feel like he's had a weird career in a sense where like he kind of started to show out in Detroit. And I think he had more projected upside back then. He was more exciting, I think, newer, younger, all those things. He got a couple of seasons in Houston where he really got to, get real playing time over a couple of years, and then they kind of got him out of there. So, for me, I look at those two things like, well, was it he played in a bad situation, or was it this young team that could have theoretically had the leash on him let him go? And is that a red flag? But then when it comes to this situation, right, like you said, it's the Miami Heat who have, been very
They know
successful.
something about, quote unquote, bad locker room guys. Remember when Jimmy Butler was a bad locker room guy once upon a time?
There you go. Exactly. So that's why it's hard to take a lot into these types of labels. But like you said, when it comes to the Heat, who've been very successful in the Jimmy Butler era, and, not to mention before that, it's a team that seems like they have a use for him. They have a use for his skill set. A lot of the fans have been wanting kind of the return of the shooting big next to Bam. And I think a lot of people rejoiced when Kevin Love signed, and he had his big moments in the playoffs as well. And I think because of that, people are like, well, you can get kind of Kevin Love plus out of Christian Wood, because Kevin Love, when you look at kind of their shot, the shot profile he had with the Heat and in general last year, it was very much 3-centric, right? Whereas you look at Christian Wood, he had a pretty good volume, not as high as Kevin Love from 3, but still pretty good, pretty high volume. And then also, took a good amount of shots inside the arc, whether at the rim, in the mid-range, and did it pretty efficiently. And you went into the efficiency there in your article and went into some of the on and off stuff, which I found really interesting. You mentioned that, his on and off wasn't great if you just put him by himself, but when you put him next to Luka and then put him next to Josh Green, put him next to Maxi Kleber, and kind of basically the Mavericks' best players, they had an awesome net rating in each one of those different pairings. And when you started adding more, it's like, okay, yeah, it does lend to the idea that he could be a valuable piece on a team that is, aiming to win. And that was really the first time we've seen Christian Wood in that type of role. Obviously, he didn't have a consistent role throughout the season. So I know I've been rambling here, but I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on all of that. Just how valuable do you think he can be in kind of a conservative stretch big role for a team that may not have that many minutes for him? Because you look through the Heat's front court rotation, it's a little bit crowded right now.
Let's see. Okay, so here's how I think about it. Every player in the NBA, they have trade-offs, right? For Christian Wood, the negative trade-off, we've talked about it. He needs like a sound defensive infrastructure around him because of his weaknesses as a defender, right? But the plus to that is like you can give, because if you think about it though, usually if you look at a team, their 5-man lineup, their weakest offensive player is usually one of their big men, right? Christian Wood's not going to be, unless you have like one of the best offenses in the league as your starting five, Christian Wood's probably not going to be your weakest offensive player, right? So what you lose from having a position where you really need defense not be there, but you're gaining it in offense that you wouldn't normally get. So you can put less offense on the floor elsewhere to kind of make up for those defensive weaknesses. Where in Dallas, they didn't really build around that. And I don't think I'm not saying he's the type of player you need to build around, but I'm just saying like they put offensive first guys around an offensive first big man. And, it didn't work out for them. That 4-man lineup I quoted, I cited in the article with Josh Green, Maxi Kleber, Luka Doncic. Obviously, I think Luka Doncic just was the perfect partner for him on offense with their pick and roll game and all the looks he was able to create for Christian Wood. And I think they had really good synergy. And then the reason I wanted Josh Green and Maxi Kleber to be the two guys is because they represent more of these defensive-minded players. I think Maxi Kleber, like when he's healthy, is like the perfect guy to pair next to Christian Wood because he can switch and rim protect. Kind of like, a fella you guys are very well familiar with, Bam Adebayo. So with the Miami thing, they do that. They have a very sound defensive infrastructure and they need to juice it with more offense. You can plug like a Christian Wood in there in that Kevin Love role. And while they are different players, Kevin Love, I think he's got more guile, more like veteran savvy than Christian Wood, but I think Christian Wood's more athletic. I think he's a better shooter at this point. Kevin Love's jumper was kind of fading. Last season, I think I don't remember his percentage off the time, but I thought he was like mid-30s or something, while Christian Wood's like in the higher 30s now. Now I'm rambling, but you see where I'm getting at here, where I think it's a much more solid fit for him and his skills.
Yeah, for sure. I completely agree with you that like it's a great fit, and especially when you have to factor in the fact that he'll be coming at the veteran minimum potentially.
Mm-hmm.
Like
and they'd be getting him. You win in this league by paying below market value for players.
Right.
100%. And the Heat have already, and Ethan
Mhm.
mentioned this on a recent pod, like they corner the market on undrafted players and getting value out of that. And they've done an awesome job at that over the years, creating rotation players out of thin air, seemingly. This time, and like they just did this summer with Josh Richardson, you're getting a guy who's kind of a proven, capable rotation player, getting him at the veterans minimum. And if you do happen to pull that off, not to mention the potential of adding a Kelly Oubre, it's guys who have proven themselves in this league before, coming in at the veterans minimum in the middle of their careers. Like all of these guys are Christian Wood is like 27, Oubre 28, something like that. You know what I mean? It's not like you're getting these guys who are proven but have been around, are journeymen, and are maybe towards the end of their careers. So I think it would be great value. I agree with you that the Heat have the perfect defensive infrastructure to really give Christian Wood a shot. And I think that there is a lot of upside there, because if it works out and he's really, if he is committed to the defensive end where he's trying and he's not just getting lost or anything like that, I think that's a good enough baseline given the offensive stuff that he's giving you, where he could get a real role, like a role where it's not just, okay, he gets plugged in here and there in the regular season. Spo doesn't really trust him. We mentioned on the playback, what if it turns out to be big man Gerald Green? Because a lot of Heat fans were excited when they signed Gerald Green back in 2016, and they had some of those similar types of qualities. Spo ended up going away from him as the season went on because of, the defensive liabilities and defensive issues that he had. And personally, I'm really high on the idea of the Heat adding Christian Wood at the minimum, because there's just no risk. Like if it doesn't work out, if they don't like his commitment to the defensive end or whatever the case may be, they don't think the offense is worth it, because Spo doesn't really like to play two bigs very often. So like already playing Love with Bam is a lot for him. So at that point, you might have to commit to playing both of them. How do you work out that rotation? Not to mention all the times that he likes to play small with Caleb or Highsmith at the 4, Jimmy at the 4. But again, it feels like the perfect spot where like he gets a role, shows out, and then maybe gets paid next summer by another team. And I don't know, it feels kind of like the stars are aligning, right? It's a great role for him, I think, and it will be a valuable addition for the Heat, in my opinion.
Well, I think you've made the point there, and this is the thing, when they've taken the minimum guys they've typically had have been these kind of diamonds in the rough, undrafted free agent types, where they take one skill and they try to develop that skill and make the guy competent in some other areas, but there ends up being a ceiling to a lot of those players. or it's the guy towards the end of his career, like, a Kevin Love, et cetera, that they're able to pay a little bit less. And the Heat have done well with both of those. There's only one case I can think of in the past, 10 years where they signed a guy pretty close to the minimum who had lottery type talent, or at least first round pick type talent. And that was Dion, actually. And for as much as we like to laugh about how things played out at the end and they shouldn't have paid him, they got a hell of a season out of Dion before they paid him. And they did it at $2.7 million. I just want to go through this a little bit because I want to get into the defensive stuff with you, Matt, because that's that and
But
attitude.
really quick, though, isn't that funny, though? Like, it's kind of the thing that we're questioning here, right? Is it going to be Dion or is it going to be Gerald Green?
Well, but as long as it's Dion for 1 year, right? Like that's all that this has to be for a team trying to win a championship is, they've taken shots on the Eddie Currys of the past or the Greg Odens, and that didn't work out because of injury issues. But this is not an injury issue with Christian Wood. This apparently is a perception issue, a defensive issue, and that kind of stuff. But I'm looking through some of the numbers that you posted here, Matt. He spent last season in the 84th percentile in scoring volume. That's measured by points scored per 75 possessions. You got these numbers off thinkingbasketball.net. 89th percentile in scoring efficiency as measured by true shooting. And I thought this was interesting too. He shot 39% on his non-garbage time 3-point attempts. So this idea that he was kind of a looter and a riot, at least from an efficiency standpoint, does not appear to be accurate. And you said that was 77th percentile among bigs, according to Cleaning Glass. And on top of that, 97% of his threes were assisted. And I think this is a good point because I think there is a perception of him that he's going to hijack your offense. We watched this on playback. We saw this too. He was basically spotting up, waiting for opportunities outside the 3-point line. He's not just jacking stuff up. So on the other side of the break, we'll get into the defense. But offensively, when you mention, okay, if you can bracket him with Bam, let's say Caleb is still here. You've got Bam, you've got Caleb, you've got Josh Richardson potentially out there with him. At least 3+ defenders, or Jimmy instead of Caleb, okay, or both out there together, right? Or even some Haywood Highsmith maybe playing the 3. It would seem to me that you would be able to protect him that way. But I just, before we get to the defensive stuff on the other side and the perception stuff, offensively, he's pretty close, to an elite level scorer in small doses.
Did you see, I made a note in there just as an aside. I thought it was interesting that like his volume and efficiency split, that 84th percentile volume, 89th percentile volume was much higher than Lauri Markkanen's the year before. He had this huge all-star surge. And obviously, whenever you archetype players, you lose some nuance, but they are similar, like type offensive first, really tall guys with ball skills who can, shoot the nylon off the net, right? And obviously Lauri Markkanen's gotten better. I think he's a better defender than Christian Wood. But just like if you can get, you're getting like a poor man's Lauri Markkanen right now. And that's, at this like stage of the game, with like the defensive infrastructure you have in place. And like historically, you guys, we were talking about like, is he going to defend? Historically, if you look at these guys with like bad defensive reputations and you put them in winning situations, they become like serviceable. Like I think the example that's kind of coming to my head right now is like, when the Bulls first got together, DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, they're like, all these guys can't defend, and lo and behold, they can defend okay in a team concept when they know that they're going to be playing with a good basketball team. Changes the math, So I'm not really that worried about him being able to kind of fit into what Spo needs him to do. He's a long guy. Again, being long in this league is very helpful. And I also, not to get to put the cart before the horse, I don't know if we were going to touch on this, but he does have some skills on defense. It's not like he can't do anything, So yeah, I like this fit a lot.
All right, I want to get into some of those skills on defense from Matt's article here. Before we do, want to mention a couple more great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Our betting partner, our legal betting partner, is Better Edge. Use the code 5RSN. Get $20 to play, legal in 45 states, including the state of Florida, because you're betting against others who use it. You're not betting against the app or against the bookie. And again, because it's based in Minneapolis instead of Costa Rica, you got a pretty damn good chance of getting your money. You will actually get your money. Actually, that's the big difference with Better Edge. So go to betteredge.com. Use the code 5RSN. We also want to mention our friend Lynette. Get your life insurance, your car insurance, your renter's insurance, your homeowner's insurance from insurancebylynette.com. 2 N's, 2 T's. Biggest Heat fan we know as well. You find us on all of our streams. Go to insurancebylynette.com for aggressive insurance. I want to get back to the defensive part here, and then I'll let Alex jump back in. I mean, you mentioned this. He's 6'10" with a 7'3" wingspan. Finished 70%, 70th percentile in block percentage. He did it without fouling a ton. Also, opponents shot 4.6 percentage points worse at the rim against the Mavs when Wood was on the floor compared to when he was on the bench. That's 90th percentile. I mean, I don't want to offend Alex here. He's going to get upset. This is not Michael Beasley stuff here. Completely lost in space. Like it does seem like there's some tools. Is the issue? I mean, again, is it perception? Is it desire? Like, what do you see when you watch him? What does it say beyond just the numbers?
So I didn't include this in the article because it's counterintuitive to the message of the article. But you have to think the one little bit of context I'll put in there is again, it's relative to the Mavericks defense when he's on and off the floor. So they don't have other good options as big men. So, if Dwight Powell's out there instead of him, you see, so he's better than Dwight Powell at rim protecting. Basically, it's not like he's 90th percentile in rim protecting. Just for people out there kind of hearing those numbers, wait, is he an elite rim protector? No, but I think the thing is, again, it's really about infrastructure. He's not the kind of guy who can anchor your defense. He's not that kind of guy, but I think he has with to contribute to a defense with good infrastructure. In the Miami Heat have one of the best defensive infrastructures of the last 10 years, with Eric Spoelstra, with Bam Adebayo, with all the crazy zone stuff they do. So I think that's really what it is that he's not somebody who can build your house, but he can live in it,
So speaking of living in that house, because again, I do think they've got the Heat have got such good defensive personnel to put around him, but that also limits, I guess, the type of lineups he can be in, and that's where some of my skepticism comes in as to how he's able to get the consistent minutes. Because I'm worried about looking at him as somebody who Spo might only feel comfortable throwing out as somebody next to Bam. But when I start thinking about all the backup fives the Heat have had, throughout this Jimmy era, when it comes to Dedmon, Cody Zeller. I guess you could throw Orlando Robinson a couple months that he had last season too. He does a lot of creative things to hide them. They're constantly, they're thrown in zone a lot. The backup centers, they're thrown in, kind of aggressive show and recover type of things, blitzing. So they're never. I think it would be a really good spot for him in that way. If they did trot him out as a backup five, maybe you put him in lineups where you got Caleb and Highsmith as the other front court pieces. Yeah,
exactly.
Right?
That's the thing. You can, not to cut you off, but you can play Highsmith more now at the 4, or have.
I think that's going to happen. I think he's in line for more minutes this season.
Mm-hmm. Because you have Wood shooting now, so you don't have Highsmith can be. You can have one non-shooter on the floor.
Yeah, for sure. And I think Highsmith does enough as a cutter with that activity there. And, just hitting the couple of open threes he might get. I don't think he's a complete zero out there as a spacer. Not very much of a positive one, but I don't think he's, whatever kind of bottom of the league spacer that people are worried about as a shooter. I don't think he's that bad. But to your point, I think it's one of those things where they've done so much with their backup fives to kind of cover them up on defense. And with the personnel they have on the perimeter, Caleb Highsmith, now Josh Richardson, not to mention Jimmy, there's a lot of optionality there. And I wonder how his minutes would get split up, how many of them will be next to Bam or not, how many of them would be next to Jimmy or not. Because you mentioned in your article, he only had 45% of his minutes last year with the Mavericks next to Luka. And that's where I had kind of all these thoughts go through my head is how do you figure out how much of his role is with the best players versus without? Because I think some of the kind of the projection with him will be that he gave you a scoring spark off the bench, but would it be better for him to play with the best players? Maybe you bring Love off the bench and he can kind of be this, alongside being a stretch big as a 5, he's also kind of a passing hub, and it'll be the same thing. You put the defensive guys next to him and Wood is the starter instead. How do you feel about the way that his role would fit on the Heat and how you manage the rotation in the lineups there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I could see him again, because because of Bam, he can play. He can start right at the 4. You can slot him at the 4. I feel confident about that. Um, it just really, I guess that's more of a, I think it's going to be between him and the franchise. Because if he is like really like an abrasive guy, like I'm sure he's going to be a little bit particular that he plays, X amount of minutes or whatever. If he can just be like, if he's comfortable being like their supercharged role player off the bench 20, 25 minutes a night, then I mean, I could see that for him. If he wants to be a starter, I could see a world where they kind of carve out a lineup with him in the starting lineup. Yeah, so I don't know. I think that might be between him and kind of the organization and Spo kind of figuring out how much rope do I have to give this guy to get this guy to do what I want, which is to buy in on defense.
Another thing really quick before we close that I was kind of thinking about with him is we talked a lot about the shooting, and I know I mentioned earlier kind of what he can do inside the arc. There's some stuff with him, and we went through a lot of this stuff on the playback. Again, for anybody that isn't watching, playback.tv/5RSN. We've been active there. We did a Christian Wood playback. We're going to do some Oubre stuff soon, I believe. Anyways, I was really intrigued by the dribble drive stuff, the way that he can kind of play off the catch, which is, a lot of that is where Caleb Martin shined in the playoffs when kind of guys were playing off of him, the way that he was able to attack, relentlessly. He's not Caleb Martin. He's not going to attack in that same way, but he is somebody who is not just a spot up big. He can kind of play off the catch and attack from there. And it's really hard to have somebody 6'10" with 7'3" wingspan who's pretty skilled with the ball relative to, other bigs, other role playing bigs coming at you there. And I wanted to get your opinion on how you feel about that aspect of his game and also what he can do as a passer. Not that he's an elite passer or anything like that, but, looking at his assist percentage, it's not too bad. Like for a big man, like it seems like he's got a little bit more to his game than the reputation that is kind of lent to him of being this offensive dynamo who just wants to get shots up and doesn't play defense.
Yeah, I didn't put this in an article, but I think off the top of my head, I think he was 81st percentile in true shooting on drives last season. And that's his, big dude. He's got ball, like he's just such a, I don't know, he's got such like a unique skill set for his size. Like he comes with like damaging trade-offs for a guy that's that big. Like he's not a good defensive big man, but he's one of the most skilled offensive bigs in the league, So yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways. Like, he can play, like you said, he can attack closeouts. I think I don't know. I need to watch more off the top of my head how I feel about his passing, especially on the move. But like he's dynamic though. He would give them something that they just didn't have last year.
He's a willing passer, is I think what I wanted.
He's definitely willing. Like that. That's all.
He's not what's the word? He's not a black hole on offense.
Yeah,
he's not Whiteside. He's not Whiteside. Can we say that? I think that's a fair way to go. It's okay if I take on Whiteside here. Alex doesn't like when I take on Beasley. Matt, I'm going to close here, and I appreciate your time. Follow him at Matt Issa 15 and all of his work there at all of his various outlets. But I'll just throw this at you and just get your final thought on there. Kelly Oubre and Christian Wood are both out there right now. They both seem to be waiting for something.
Similar labels.
Maybe it's the Miami Heat that they're waiting on. Maybe it's the Dame trade. If you could have one, who would you take?
Christian Wood.
Okay.
Pretty clearly, yeah.
No hesitation on that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kelly Oubre is kind of, his reputation as a defender has been a little overstated. But I will say though, like there is value in like last year when everybody was hurt, he was kind of getting a lot of like on ball reps, and I feel like there's something valuable out just getting those repetitions. I think he's got a little bit more on ball game than like that archetype would suggest. But yeah, I'd still take Christian. He's like a unicorn for that side. He's Lauri Markkanen light to me offensively.
At the veteran's minimum.
Yeah, at the veteran, I cited this in the article as well, but I was like, appraising him at something like a $15 million a year. If you can get him at like whatever it is, $3 million a year, that's how you win in this league, is by going under the market.
And the key thing here is if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. I mean, that's the thing. They have other options they can go to, and he's at the point too that like if you don't make it work within organization eventually, particularly an organization like the Miami Heat, your next stop is China. Like that's how this typically works. Like I mean, in all seriousness, with the skill set or not, if, you know, you only get so many go-rounds at this, and it didn't work in the last two organizations. He goes to Miami and he can't find playing time there. I don't know where you go after that. So it seems like a good investment on both parts, actually.
I'll say this as a close. I think he's closer in terms of like his on-court production to being like in the top, I want to say top third of players in the league, right? So like a starter caliber player than he is to China.
Right.
Definitely closer to that. Okay. I think he's good. I think he's really good.
All right. Well, let's see how it goes. Matt, we appreciate your work. You're good at what you do. So everybody check him out. Matt Issa 15. Thanks to Alex. Thanks to our sponsors, A Aggressive Insurance, Better Edge, and Prize Picks. We'll be back with more episodes throughout the week.
Thank you for listening to the Five on the Floor on the Five Regional Sports Network.